Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Beyond the Hype, Real Customer Stories on Migration Risks from Dynamics GP. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Elizabeth Morse. I'm the event manager here at Cavallo. I sit on our marketing team. We have a really special program with two Cavallo customers today, but before we introduce them, I'd like to cover just a few items first. Please ask questions throughout the program using that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best to get to all of those at the end of the webinar. There may be a chance that I interrupt and ask questions throughout, just depending on how the conversation is going. But if we're unable to answer your question, we will follow up with you following the webinar. Today's event is being recorded, so you're going to be able to view it on our YouTube channel and event page very soon once we get the recording processed. Like I said, we have a very special and unique program for all of you today. Joining my colleague Paul McClellan and I, we have Tony Colanino of NewStar Sourcing and Marcus Heemstra of Millborn. I couldn't think of anyone better to guide us through the conversation today than Paul McClellan. So Paul is Cavallo's distribution strategy advisor and also a former Cavallo customer. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Paul to introduce himself, set the stage, and help our guests introduce themselves as well. So Paul, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Elizabeth. Appreciate that. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here talking about this really important topic, in my opinion. I've got 30 years experience in distribution, including owning and operating lightbulbs.com. A little bit about me. I live in frigid Minnesota with my wife and our 9 kids. I'm a child of the 80s. I'm a big fan of technology and 80s rock, and I'm a software developer by trade. So before I came to work here at Cavallo, as I mentioned, I spent 30 years at lightbulbs.com. We were one of the earliest pioneers of e-commerce, launching our website in 1996. And in the late 90s and early 2000s, we harnessed the power of the internet and grew rapidly, which resulted in us pushing our ERP to its limit. So after a failed ERP migration attempt 25 years ago, I became a bit gun shy on this topic. And so when we outgrew our ERP and had to make a change, I was a little bit nervous and apprehensive. So we hit the market looking for ERP solutions that would help us handle our increased volume that the internet traffic gave us. And we're on the fence with several of them as they didn't completely solve all of our business problems. And that was until 2008. And, I still remember the day when I demoed SalesPad roughly 18 years ago, and it blew me away at how intuitive it was and how it was going to help us with all the growing pains that we were experiencing. So by leveraging SalesPad's workflow automation that many of you attending this are likely aware of, we 3x'd our annual volume. We ended up transacting over $215 million, and we processed over 3 million sales orders, and we did this flawlessly. So many years ago, after installing and customizing SalesPad, we finished that migration to GP in roughly 60 days with 0 issues. And anybody that has done an ERP migration or is contemplating one knows that's very unlikely. That's a rarity. The amazing workflow automation from SalesPad that we all know and love, it removed risk from both our ERP migration and then into the years to come with just the day-to-day functionality. So as you might imagine, my previous company, lightbulbs.com, and our heavy integration into GP and SalesPad, they were such a large part of our success story. So roughly 3 years ago, when there was this concerted effort by Microsoft to push GP customers to BC, or maybe even off of GP to another cloud platform, I was a bit skeptical, a bit apprehensive. We were so highly customized and optimized in GP and SalesPad that I was really cautious about these supposed required ERP migrations. And so what we're going to get into today is 2 stories with Tony and Marcus about their experience with this topic. So Tony, if you could just start off by introducing yourself and NewStar, that'd be great.
Sure. I'm still a little bit distracted. I thought I heard you say you had 9 children.
I do. Yes.
Kind of threw me for a loop there. I didn't hear anything else after that. No. Thanks, Paul. So yeah, I'm Tony Colanino. I'm the president of NewStar Sourcing and Service. We are based in Fremont, Nebraska, just outside of Omaha. And we are, at our core, I guess, a wholesale distributor of feed ingredients, ingredients that go into feed for livestock. So we have a very small team. We a total of 20 people, 6 being remote salespeople, another 7 working in manufacturing and the warehouse, and the rest are admin team. So the company's just literally just celebrated our 9th birthday. We've grown it into in 2025 we exceeded 140 million in revenue, but that's all done little by little. A lot of SKUs, a lot of customers. We cover a territory that would basically blanket the upper Midwest, and yeah, we've kind of lived through this whole experience that some of you are currently gnawing on, and I'm excited to, well, I don't know if I'm excited or embarrassed to share my experience. It's a little of both, but happy to help any way I can.
Thank you, Tony. That was great. I think that any experience, even especially the rough ones, the bad ones, are super helpful for those of us that are either on the fence or slightly pessimistic and kind of wondering and wanting to just do this due diligence to do best by our companies. Thank you for that introduction. Marcus, do you mind introducing yourself?
Hey, everybody. My name is Marcus Heemstra. I've been with Millborn Seeds for about a dozen years. Millborn is a company, implemented SalesPad, I think in about 2010, 2011, somewhere in there. So we've been with SalesPad Desktop for quite a while. We are a specialty seed company based in Brookings, South Dakota. When I started, I was about the 11th, 12th full-time employee. And today we're well over 80 employees. We were a single location back then. Now we have 9, I think. And so the business has grown and developed and expanded a lot. It's been a wild ride. It's been a fun ride. And that's kind of led us through this journey of like we were using SalesPad, and not all that different than Paul. We've customized and optimized a lot of our processes around workflow and some of those types of things. And so got into our journey here and took a look at the BC, and kind of happy to share our story. Hopefully somebody can learn or take something from it. Not all that different than Tony. We're in agriculture. We have a ton of different SKUs. We distribute seed all over the United States, primarily the United States and Canada. Bunch of different customers. Anybody who's in agriculture knows like some of the seasonal aspects of it. And so we'll go from, in a busy day is 15 times as many sales orders as a slow day for us. And so, just kind of the scaling back and forth of being in season and out of season and some of those types of things is a challenge to our business, but something that SalesPad Desktop has really helped us with over the years. And so looking forward to the conversation today.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for that introduction. There's a saying that we have here at Cavallo that we repeat a lot, and it's, if you've met one distributor, you've met one distributor. You've not met them all. We are all unique in our complexity, and I want to kind of focus on the complexity of our businesses. For lightbulbs.com, we were a lighting distributor, heavy into e-commerce. Even though we focused on lighting, we had over 2,000 categories of products and about 150,000 SKUs in our catalog. We were present on Amazon, on Walmart. We had a B2B department. We had our own website. And the nuances of our industry, coupled with our main competition being Amazon, where we had these fulfillment standards, we created a very complex company, and it was complex by necessity. Tony, I remember reading in your case study that you did a while back, and even in some of our discussions, you've described your business as having very high operational complexity. And so I'm hoping you can share a little bit about that, and even talking about why Dynamics GP and SalesPad were originally chosen to help manage those operations.
Yeah, well, I guess we had the good fortune of, like I said, we just started the company 9 years ago. So a lot of we're in a highly competitive market, and our competitors had old technology. They had an old way of doing things. And, with us coming in with a clean slate, we took a different approach to warehousing and, goods management and order fulfillment. And, we built an infrastructure in our warehouse where, the entire warehouse was racked. Every location was an individual bin. All of our products are not only tracked by expiration date, but more importantly, since we're in the food chain, everything is lot number tracked. So essentially, for traceability purposes, we have to be able to, if there's a problem that a customer has with a feed, we have to be able to track it all the way back. And so it was so critically important when we started this to implement SalesPad alongside GP. We had familiarity with GP from previous work experience, but SalesPad was new, and it was brought to us by our third party provider. Like I said, we're a small company. We don't have an IT department. We outsource everything, and they came in and implemented SalesPad to really allow us to have high confidence in that fulfillment and tracking process. And with that came some customizations that were done, day one in the business, and they really have served us well the entire time. And we kind of got to the point where we were so used to everything SalesPad could do for us that we thought it was easy to replicate. As we look to make, to upgrade or change our ERP system. And that was perhaps one of my fatal errors in that whole process.
Fascinating. It's as a distributor, I think I can speak for the panel of the three of us, where it's almost impossible to function without some sort of custom work being done, right? Because we're all so unique, and GP obviously needs to be supercharged by SalesPad, and that adds a lot. But then even within SalesPad, customizing that to your current operation and the way that you go about doing business, and even with the technology that you onboard to help you accomplish that business. Marcus, I know Millborn deals with specialty seeds, very complex units of measure, and even seasonal peaks. And so I'm wondering how the combination of GP and SalesPad helped you with that flexibility to give your team that they could handle those unique agricultural workflows. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are also lot tracked with all of our items. Seed needs to grow, and so everything is tested to ensure viability and no noxious weeds, all those types of things to make sure the product. And so the UDF functionality within SalesPad, hugely important for our business, just to be able to track a lot of those attributes, make sure that we have documentation of what something is, and then we can go back and have all that traceability, kind of like Tony mentioned. And then workflow is also it's one of my favorite SalesPad pieces. And I know that's a very common response, but I just think the really cool thing with SalesPad workflow is just like how configurable it is, and that's one of the words we've talked about a lot internally here. Is it's so nice that we can configure something to work and to our business versus having to customize, develop something, and just the flexibility of the tool to really tailor it towards our business. And so we get into different orders, and so our seed, we do a lot of blending and packaging. And so I liken it a little bit to baking. And so if you're baking cookies, you need milk, you need eggs, you need flour, sugar, all those things. But then we also sell the flour and sell the eggs and sell all those types of things. And so we end up with multiple sizes of bags, and then we can also put those bags into other ones and all those different things. So there's a lot of complexity around how big is the bag, how much is in it, how are we going to repackage it together, and item substitutability basically. And so the UDF pieces in the workflow has really helped us to be able to tailor that to help us know exactly where an order is at and what we need to do with it.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. And for those watching that are wondering more about UDFs, it stands for user defined fields. And in addition to the workflow automation that SalesPad provides, the unlimited user defined fields is amazing. We leverage that too, Marcus. We were heavy at the customer level, the sales document level, and it opened up a lot of avenues of doing business that we weren't previously able to take advantage of. And again, going back to that complexity, the more we implemented that, the more reliant we were on that level of freedom that it gave us, right? And so the more that we leveraged customization, UDFs, workflow automation inside of GP and SalesPad, that dual combination, the more we were attached to that, not in a negative sense. It allowed us to grow and stabilize, and so it became ultra valuable to us. So we've established a little bit of this platform of complexity of our three unique businesses and the way that we utilize the software. So let's shift a minute and talk about BC. I remember my previous VAR, my Microsoft VAR, which is our value-added reseller, our contact, our reseller for GP. This probably about 3 years ago-ish when Microsoft kind of announced their sunsetting plans for support for GP. And it was this, shall I say, slightly aggressive push for us to move to BC, where, in my opinion, it's like, well, we're doing great on GP and SalesPad. Like we don't have a lot of needs and wants. Like our business is highly optimized. But of course, I looked at it because I trusted my VAR, my contact there, the GP partner, and it's a Microsoft product. So it seemed very natural for me to look at it as this is away from going on-prem into the cloud. And I know, Tony, you did the full migration and you reverted back. Marcus, I believe you were still in that research phase. I know that many of these GP users, these businesses, feel a little spooked by this marketing message suggesting that they're going to be left behind, or they're not going to be as secure, or you're not going to be able to leverage these cloud features. So, Marcus, as Millborn scaled rapidly, you did this formal assessment of BC. What is it exactly that you were hoping to find in this cloud solution that you didn't think that you had with the on-premise solution of GP?
Great question. I think that we originally started it. We were growing really fast at that point, especially, and the piece of kind of accountability and ownership we'll take internally on the whole process was like, I think it's natural. Like as you're growing, obviously your processes are changing rapidly, right? And so the piece that we didn't consciously realize at the time was like how much flexibility we both had with SalesPad desktop and workflow and all those pieces, and how much flexibility we needed with just how our business was evolving and changing and growing. And I think we had this hope that by going to the next newest, greatest, brightest, shiny object, that flexibility and those tools that we had and our ability to change them and tweak them along the way was going to be like so much better. And as we got into the process, as Paul mentioned, we never actually switched. So we hired a firm to help us really kind of design it, and spent an enormous amount of time and money and everything, like planning how to do this. And the budget tripled, and like all the things that were massive red flags. And we got to the end of it, we were just like, guys, we can't do this. Like we can't write the check. We're moving to a new tool that is really expensive and going to maybe be as useful as what we have today, and be a little bit more pigeonholed, if you will, into a specific way of working, because we didn't have all the flexibility. We were like designing it to the workflow as we were using it that day. But our workflow is constantly changing here as our business is growing. And so the decision actually, as much as it hurt and it was like got the sunk cost, and just like we all had to deal with our own like PTSD for a couple of years after that of like no IT projects. The decision was actually quite simple to be like, no, we're not doing it, because it just like wasn't going to be viable for where we were at.
Yeah, I remember having like a similar experience. I remember we got down the road pretty far, and for me, the point that I observed is that I saw no upside to it. Right? Sure, it's in the cloud, which opens up some accessibility, but I didn't see a solution that was better than what I had in place.
Yep.
Everything was going to be a downgrade, and so I had to spend a lot of money and invest a lot of time, and I know stress would come along with that to be at a lesser playing field. Now, I remember my original quote was around $250,000 to do the full migration, and I know that you get scope creep, and it's always more expensive than the quote. So again, $250,000. Do you recall what your quoted price was for the migration?
I don't remember exactly. I mean, it was right in that ballpark with where yours was, but I vividly remember it like tripled from when we like started the process to when we actually got into like, okay, and this is what it's actually going to cost to like do it, when we like got everything kind of figured out, made all of our decisions. And it was like that. There's always a little scope creep too, but it's like,
Yeah.
it felt like a stretch at the first number. And then at the tripled number, it just felt insurmountable.
Yeah, the first number got you interested, and then reality set in, and you saw what it was actually going to
And
cost.
maybe it was a little bit, blessing in disguise a little bit, because had
Yeah,
it not done that, maybe we would have tried or whatever. That made it a lot easier for us.
right.
First number got me interested. The final number almost got me fired.
Well, let's get into that, Tony. And I know this might be a little, it's either going to be painful or therapeutic for you to kind of delve back into your experience, but either way, we're going for it. You can think back before you implemented, do you remember that primary driver or the selling point that made you think, how hard can it be to migrate? Let's push ahead with this. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing was that the our partner who set us up in the beginning. The original people had all moved on, new people had come on. We were kind of running on autopilot. We didn't have any real active support and really very little dialogue with our VAR over the final 4 or 5 years. And so as the push started to happen and we were getting pinged by other parties promoting Business Central, I started to think, well, it might be a good time to not only change partners, but technologies had to evolve. Things have to be better than they were when we started in 2017. And then the other thing was the scare tactic of, hey, this all is going to come to an end in 2028 or 2029, and you need to be first rather than last because there won't be enough help out there to convert everybody when it has to happen. And I heard that from multiple folks all trying to bang the same drum, right? So I just thought it was timely with the wanting to switch providers and thinking that maybe we needed a total refresh, right? So and getting ahead of the curve, which I learned more since then about the curve. But so yeah, that was kind of the impetus. And then the initial sales pitch is great. I mean, from a visibility standpoint, there were some really low hanging fruit things with Business Central that we did not have embedded in what we were doing with SalesPad GP. That I'm like, man, if this is the tip of the iceberg, we're really going to be in good shape. And so we were eager to get started. And I think the thing that really gave me, and I don't want to say false confidence, but gave me enough confidence was, I'm going from a Microsoft product to a Microsoft product. My assumption, which proved to be wrong, was that, these things would be so easily integrated and a migration from one to the other would be a point and click and drag kind of thing. And again, showing my ignorance there, it was anything but that.
Right. Yeah, I think the small print likely somewhere states that this is not an upgrade. It's an entirely new implementation, and it
Yeah.
is. There's not like an easy button to click to migrate your data and processes over. It's recreate it in a completely different environment.
Yeah.
And
I'm moving inventory. I'm just everything was, all the historical data. It's like, really, this isn't just a dump it was
Mhm.
really surprising to me.
So as we look at feature parity and what we would call a functional gap, let's spend a minute talking about that. I remember when I looked at the integration, I would benchmark all the features I was currently performing on. Could I create parity in the BC environment? And I was left wanting on a lot of those. Sometimes I would see something that BC would offer. I'm like, oh, that feels like an upgrade. What I didn't really fully respect and realize is, you know what, I could add that to GP into SalesPad. So they have something extra, which I use to kind of justify the potential move to BC. It would be far easier just to take those one or two features and custom, write them back to GP and SalesPad. Marcus, we talked about that, rough, call it six-figure estimate, couple $100,000, if not more, to have that feature parity. We talked about UDFs and the way that Millborn relies on those. Can you share more about 100 plus user-defined fields that would make that replication to move from GP to BC? Talk about UDF specifically on how that might break the process by trying to leverage that in BC.
Yeah, the UDFs. One of the interesting things about, I mean, I just added one this morning. Like we add them all the time. And so I think, uh, you know, and I, maybe I've just suppressed them in some of my memories, but there were a lot of like pros that we were, looking at, just kind of like both of you mentioned, of like things that are like going to be better or easier. And the one thing I kind of want to add to what you guys were just talking about too is with the thinking that GP was going away, or however you want to classify that. One of the pieces we had talked about a lot internally was just like, well, how much money do we want to invest in a product that's not going to be here for the long term? Like, at what point do we kind of like switch over? Because it's like putting a dollar in now, knowing that 5 years from now or 10 years from now, it's not going to be sustainable. It's like, well, why don't we just make the change now? And then we're investing in something for the more long term. And so, obviously, that was a little short-sighted since it's not actually going away, as you just talked about. But with the UDFs, that I think we got into it, but we didn't really have a solution that was nearly as flexible or dynamic. And I think that's probably where a lot of our cost stuff was coming in, of like, we need information about the seeds that we put into our mixtures that need to be on the bags for like labeling purposes and some of those types of things, right? And SalesPad allows us to largely do that all within SalesPad, because of the UDFs and whatnot. And one of the things, and there's nothing wrong with like additional vendors and third-party add-ons and all those types of things, because they're wonderful and there's absolutely a place for them. But when you have to add one for like every single little thing, the management of that becomes a lot, right? And that's probably where, when we were getting into BC, we were really kind of finding a little bit more some challenges. Was like there was too many of those that were doing like small things, if that makes sense. Not like small in the sense of like not unimportant, but just not, the complexity. I don't know if you've ever seen the chart where it's like, two people working together and it's a single line, and then three, and it makes the triangle, and like exponentially gets harder. Like we felt like we were in that cycle, and it was just like getting away from us from like a management standpoint. And as Tony talked about, we don't have an in-house IT group. Like we outsource all these things. And so just the management of those types of things was becoming increasingly complex, therefore, and that was just a challenge we knew we couldn't handle.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, a lot of distributors, you can be in that 50 to 100 head count. We averaged around 75, peaked at 90, and as I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, is I'm a software developer by trade, and as business owner, I took on the IT hat role, and I'm like, you know what? Let me spearhead these things, which is gives you a lot of granular control, but it's also stressful. A lot of distributors, they're in that range where they don't have a full-time IT person, and so they rely on their own knowledge and experience. And then you have to have some trust when you're outsourcing. Tony, NewStar, as you mentioned, you went through this very costly, financially and emotionally move to BC. You had talked about in some previous discussions and the case study that you did, that what used to be 2 to 3 clicks turned into 10 clicks, which I think is a really good, simple way to describe holistically what happened. Can you give us some examples of what happened specifically with that?
Yeah, I mean, there were, if we had the time, I'd pull in everyone from out of the admin room and have them tell the horror stories. But yeah, it just seemed, specifically, I guess a good example is in the fulfillment process, right? We had logic in place before that, was very good about, well, here's an example. Marcus talked about the baking process, where they might have something that's used as an ingredient that's also an out the door sale product, right? So as a simple example, we have a product where we might have a broken pallet. It's got 24 bags on it instead of 40 because we picked a few off for production. A customer orders a full pallet. BC would want to grab the 24 that were available and then get 16 off the next pallet, creating another partial pallet, where the logic we had is you send the next full pallet out. So we would have to undo that fulfillment, redo a different fulfillment. And that was, again, multiple steps to get that done, where, the logic just said, hey, why don't, if there's a full one, you take a full one. If there's a partial, you pass. But Other things were just in the accounting process, and we have a direct ship business where we're meshing a vendor invoice with a freight invoice to then invoice the customer, and pulling all those together was just a lot more complicated. It wasn't intellectually more complicated. It just was more time consuming to grab the pieces you needed to build the customer from what we had before.
Right. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I know we've spent several minutes talking about the negatives, right? The fear and the concern and the negative experiences. Let's highlight for a few minutes some of the bits of relief and efficiency that we've learned and experienced staying with GP and SalesPad. Tony and Marcus, you both experienced a migration, a BC migration at different levels of completion. But ultimately, you both chose to come back and stick with GP and SalesPad with this renewed sense of satisfaction and growth potential. Marcus, you kind of alluded to that, where you look into these greener pastures and you just didn't realize really what you had. So I'd love it if you could both shed some light on this relief that you and your teams experienced and the overall sentiment that you now have on your decision to stay with GP and SalesPad. So Marcus, we'll start with you, and then Tony, if you want to jump in after that.
I think one of the, I think one of the more freeing things is like, I mentioned it earlier, but we had this real internal concern about like, how much do we want to invest in a product that's not going to be here for the long haul? And, that created some thinking and the kind of almost a backlog, you will, of like improvement, where it's like, hey, we didn't do some things because we're just like, I don't know, like, is it really going to be worth it? Because it's probably going to change anyways. And when we finally officially said no, there's certainly, like you kind of talked about, some freeing feelings of just like, hey, you know what, like, this is what we have, this is what we're going to be using. And so like, now let's go, let's make those changes to workflow, or let's do these other things and improve our business and improve our operations, because it's not a waste of time, and it's going to be beneficial.
Yeah, I have a lot of the same experiences, and I think the biggest one for us, obviously when we made the decision to go to BC and went through a year and a half of training with a new partner who was very eager to get us on BC. When I made the decision to pull the plug after 7 weeks of live with BC, I had to find a new partner, or wanted to find a new partner. And this particular provider is also a very pro GP advocate. They're an advocate. They're a good partner with Cavallo. So the best thing that came for me out of this was a new relationship with that partner who was really engaged in helping us get it right. And so I would say our level of interaction, in the 7 months since we made the cutback with both our partner and Cavallo, has really brought us a lot of the improvements, like Marcus said before. The things that, we're all of a sudden checking things off our wish list because now we have the right relationships with people and the right contacts, and we know how to engage better. They understand our business a little better, where all we did for a number of years was just kind of work around the things that, were just lingering out there that we thought maybe we could fix, but we didn't know really where to go. Now we know where to go.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks for sharing that. In my experience, I've found, and I think you guys have found as well, that GP and SalesPad combined, like that perfect marriage of those two programs can really help accomplish many, if not all, of these cloud-driven features. If you look at it with a little bit of creativity and some ingenuity, and you have the right partners, you can accomplish a lot of that and still grow drastically running this on-prem solution. So let's shift gears a minute to the longevity of GP. Marcus, you said, I think a couple times, that you wanted an ERP that was here for the long haul. I mean, who doesn't, right? It's the lifeline of our business, is that ERP. It's that system of record and the brain behind our business. You both have very unique experiences with your migrations to BC. Cavallo has many customers with us here today that might be feeling that pressure to move on. And so I want to speak a minute about long-term GP confidence and how those two programs work together to create long-term stability. I had a webinar last month where I mentioned at the very core, GP is running off of Microsoft SQL. And we're going to get technical here for a minute, but this is really important. Microsoft SQL is a relational database management system that houses all of your GP data. GP has some business logic built in, but at its core, it's really just interfacing with all the data that you have for your business that's being stored in SQL. SalesPad is also an interface, but it is one that supercharges the features inside of GP, and it brings loads of new database fields, harken back to the UDFs, into that experience. So both GP and SalesPad require Microsoft SQL to work, but neither one requires the other program or interface to function purely on its own. Microsoft is mentioned. I'm sure you guys are aware of it. I was aware of it. A lot of our customers are aware of it. Microsoft has mentioned a few critical dates that I wanted to just quickly highlight. In 2029, Microsoft has said that they are ending their support for GP, which basically means that the compliance and regulatory data updates for payroll and sales tax, that's going to stop. But it's really comforting to know that there are third parties out there that are providing support, data support for those updates if you need to use GP for payroll and sales tax. And then in 2031, this affects everybody, so let's address it. Microsoft indicated they're going to stop the security patches for the core GP program. While this is important to know, GP itself is almost always residing on a server, protected by firewalls and many other security measures, so it's inherently not much of a risk. I mean, if a hacker breached your firewall and they're in your network, they generally are not super interested in stealing payables data or looking at your inventory counts. Worth noting, this date in 2031 is also when Microsoft has indicated that users can no longer purchase seats or licenses. One more very quick note about long-term GP stability, and this part is incredibly important to keep track of. As mentioned, SalesPad does not necessarily need GP to run. It needs Microsoft SQL. So what does the landscape look like for Microsoft SQL? SQL is not being impacted directly by the 2029 and 2031 time changes. Each version of Microsoft SQL has a minimum of 10 years of support, and Microsoft has announced publicly that they will support Windows and SQL up to 2029. So if you do the math here, and if you ensure that you're patching all of your installs of Windows, SQL, and GP, that should give you around 14 years before you have any concerns about GP not functioning as intended. And even then, there are organizations and solutions being put into place to ensure continuity well beyond then. So, Marcus, I feel like 14 years is long term. I feel like that would check off that box. It did for me. With technology, anything beyond 5 years always gave me peace of mind. Like if I don't have to think about it in the next 5 years, maybe put a pin in it. If it's 10 years, it almost feels like a lifetime. So for me personally, 14 years felt really comforting. So that just means there's no rush to move away from GP if it is what's working best for you today. And so to our customers, I would say the decision is yours. It doesn't need to be motivated out of any false sense of fear. Marcus, you have something else?
I was just gonna say that's 2012, like going backwards, like that, like 10 lifetimes ago.
Right.
I mean, it goes fast. Like time truly goes fast. But when you think about that, it's like, 14 years is forever.
It's a lifetime in technology. Yeah.
It's hard to commit to anything like business wise for 14 years. Like, I mean, we don't have that long of a lease on our office.
Well, I don't know if I have 13 years of lease on me, but I think the key thing in this too is, that is a lifetime. But I think about all the acceleration of technology and what another 5 years of development can mean. I think some of these things that were complex and difficult and challenging in our migration last year, are going to be old hat, and whatever's put in front of us in 2030 or 2031, or whatever's put in front of the person after me, is going to be far better than anything, we're seeing today. I don't think we're going to have this 10 years of latency. I think we're going to see systems and tools and opportunities that are well beyond what we're even able to do today. So, having 5 years to let this roll out, I think it plays out perfectly.
You may very well have that easy button to upgrade GP to X platform, whatever that may be, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are still, by our count, an estimation of potentially tens of thousands of businesses still running GP. Like there's a very large quantity of businesses using that platform, and nobody wants the headache and the pain of migration. Nobody wants that, right? You feel forced into it, or you think that there's something waiting for you on the other side. Yeah, I think that there's some great time on our side.
I totally agree with Tony, and we've talked about that a lot internally as well. Just think about like AI. Wasn't the first version of Chat GPT like 2021 or something like that, 2022? Like that's 4 or 5 years ago. So like this is 3 times as long as that's been around. Like the things that are going to change in the next 14 years, we can't even like comprehend them. And so we're gonna not stress for a little bit here and see how things play out.
Well, and I may offer one other thing to anyone who is considering making that move. Vet your provider. This software is still new to them in a lot of cases, and I would make sure that they've got very specific and redundant experience in rolling this out to people. That was the one thing we found in our training is we spent a lot of hours that we paid for being trained watching our trainer try to figure something out. So the gloss is all in the marketing, but make sure you've got people who really understand your business and are really going to invest the time to understand your business. But go into it with skepticism.
And
make
Tony,
them prove it to you.
That hurts especially bad when you're paying for them to learn.
It was not fun. Yeah.
I've done 3 ERP migrations, and when we were looking at the GP to BC migration 3 years ago, I had some people on my leadership team that were really pushing for it. And Tony, I think I remember you saying once in a discussion or in your case study, like this is what I kept saying to them. I don't have another ERP migration in me. Like I can't. I don't have the ability to sustain the time and stress that it takes. It's almost like a heart transplant for a business. Do you agree?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And and I really hadn't gone through one before. Most of my career I'd been in large, corporate settings, and it was always somebody else's problem and a speed bump for me and whatever I was doing. But to make that decision on behalf of our organization, to put my team through the agony and training that went nowhere, and then 7 weeks ago live that had, fortunately we're only a 2-story building, so everybody that jumped out of a window survived it. But it was awful, and then having to go to my board and fall on the sword and say, I know we spent all this money, we're going right back to where we were. So I again, just the one takeaway from me is be skeptical, look in the corners, and make sure you're getting everything you think you're going to get.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Don't take this lightly, right? Like this is a big decision. And when you're hit with this, we did the go live, and at 7 weeks, what do? Do you keep pushing forward? Like every day, it becomes scarier and scarier to revert, and equally scary to move forward. You get in a little bit of a gridlock. I've been there before, and you're like, it feels like a lose-lose, but at the end of the day, you're like, all right, long term, I got to do this because this is at least stable, and I know what to expect. I think that's a great piece of final advice. That's super helpful. Marcus, do you have any closing comments or final advice from your end?
No, nothing in particular that you guys haven't already said. If there's somebody who's listening that wants to follow up afterwards, I'd be happy to engage in any of that sort of dialogue. But I think you guys have hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, same here. I'm available if anybody wants to hear more of the horror story.
Yeah, battle wounds. We've learned a lot, and the goal here is that we have collectively gone down this road. So you, the Cavallo customer, can be more well-informed to make that best decision for your company. Elizabeth, you want to take it from?
Yeah, thank you guys. Well said. We have a few questions that are coming in. So, Paul, I think this one will be best for you. If you don't know the exact deadline, then we'll have to get back to this person. But what was the exact deadline when you can no longer buy new licenses, and how do you suggest we handle that? Like, should they proactively stock up a little, or what do you think?
That's a good question. I believe it's April of 2031. I'm going off of memory for that one. It all comes down to the type of licensing that you have, whether it's perpetual or subscription based. Perpetual, when you own that seat or that license, once GP support goes away, it's yours. It's not checking some Microsoft server to authenticate that license. But if you have something that's more subscription based, that could create some accessibility issues long term. So it'd be good to talk to your VAR about what type of licensing that you have. And that's still many years away, but I believe it's April 2031.
Okay, awesome. Let's see. I think this is just a comment. If we've never upgraded our GP to acquire a feature, it's hard to see any fear in Microsoft halting GP development. So, anything to add to that, Paul?
No, I felt the same personally. Like
Okay.
we did our GP updates every couple of years to be compliant and supported. I mean, our feature set was in SalesPad. I don't think from the time that we launched in 2008 to the time that I left my business about a year ago, I don't think we ever utilized any new GP features. Tony and Marcus, how about you guys?
It's been a long time.
Yeah. Okay. Tony and Marcus, can you share who all was involved in your migration project, if you will? Was it a committee? Was it just a small group? Was it maybe just yourselves? Can you share a little bit of, who all you involved in the big decisions?
Yeah, go ahead, Marcus.
I'll say we had ultimately our CEO and then myself kind of decided the answer was no. But in terms of like the exploration and everything, I mean, we had people from all over the company, people in customer service and sales and distribution and logistics, and kind of we'd kind of selected key users from every kind of facet of the organization. And I think that was good. Like I would do that again in terms of the way we did, because we had a diverse set of perspectives, and kind of like everybody comes with their own set of needs, which are all valid, and I don't expect a person in sales to know what the logistics person needs, and vice versa, and all those types of things. The time commitment then does get pretty substantial, because there was a lot of different people from a lot of different areas of the company.
Yeah. Same here. Myself, Ted Brands, our vice president, accountant, and then the team that runs all purchasing, logistics, warehousing, inventory management, manufacturing. Again, not a big team. There were maybe 6 of us at the core.
Okay. But still, you got some different perspectives in there with 6. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Does anyone have a comparison chart of other software you looked at before choosing BC? Or was it just BC? Yeah.
We did look at NetSuite as well, and I don't remember specifically, but they ended up, from our perspective, they ended up being very similar. But then BC seemed to be the better path, so that's what we spent more time on. But we did spend a little bit of time looking at other options, but that was a few years ago too now. So
okay. Let's see. Can someone provide more examples of what you have in SalesPad that did not exist in BC? So is there anything that comes into mind, Tony or Marcus, or even Paul?
For us, I know we had some integrations from SalesPad that really assisted us in our routing, basically combining orders to make an optimal truck run. And from what we had in BC, they tried a third-party bolt-on that didn't really work. So it really became a fully caveman-style manual process in those 7 weeks in BC. We just could not make that work the way we needed to. That was one example. And I know, again, I could go get Tyler Brown and he could probably give you 5 more, but
I don't really remember specifically, but I know that the areas, especially that we've kind of like customized and spent some time optimizing, like with our blending and our packaging and some of those more unique areas, were the areas where it's like, yep, we're gonna have to do that all over again
yeah,
because it doesn't. I mean, of course, you can enter a sales order and like customer, like all the extremely basic functionality was transferable, right? But it's when we got into like unique aspects of it, which kind of sounds like with Tony and their routing piece. Ours was
yeah,
more probably on the blending and the packaging side of
yeah.
things and building
Assemblies,
out those
those
mixes.
types of things, right? Same thing, Marcus.
I remember
Sure.
when down that road, Elizabeth, that they looked at quoting out BC, and to have feature parity on what we were doing with GP and SalesPad, they had 17 third-party programs, like from the app source or a third-party customization, just to create feature parity. So aside from the $250,000 implementation fee, I had this additional like 70 grand a year in subscription fees. And again, it's these bolt-on products where it starts looking a little bit like Frankenstein to replicate this kind of simplistic yet very deep integration that I'm currently running.
Yeah.
Okay, have a question. Are you considering creating your own database separate from GP? I feel that GP, being an older system, has limitations that could hinder your features. I'm not aware of anything on our roadmap like that right now. Paul, anything to add on your end?
I would say stay tuned. We've got some creative initiatives internally about breathing life into this solution long term. We've talked to a lot of our GP and SalesPad customers, and they echo what I did back at lightbulbs.com and what Tony and Marcus have said, where I don't need to switch, so why should I? So if you don't really need to right now, do you need to do it long term? What would give you that confidence long term? What would open up more feature functionality long term? And so we take that very seriously with all of our customers, that this is their livelihood. You know, the ERP cannot be overstated. It's absolutely critical. And so we've got several different initiatives here at Cavallo where we're looking into different upgrades, changes, improvements long term to kind of augment and bolt onto this GP SalesPad environment.
Yeah. And I think this question's a good one to kind of go off of what you were just saying. So what is the pro-con angle for SalesPad to have customers on GP on-prem versus cloud? And, there's a pros and cons for every business. Like Paul said early on, if you've met one distributor, you've met one distributor, right? We're committed to our customers' success, not to a timeline. And so we support our customers where they're at in their ERP journeys.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's see. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything here. I don't believe so. As I'm scrolling, I think that's it, guys. That's going to conclude our webinar today. Tony, Marcus, thank you very much for spending almost an hour with us to tell your stories that will hopefully help some other folks in their decisions that they might be, currently working through. So we also appreciate you offering up your mentorship and guidance if anyone wanted to reach out. Paul, thank you. We appreciate your perspective as a former SalesPad customer and distributor. This was our very first webinar of 2026. There's plenty more to come, so keep an eye on our event page to view upcoming webinars and events. You can find that at www.cavallo.com/events-schedule. That's where you can register for all the events as well as watch recordings like this one. So if you'd like to explore your organization's specific needs or have questions about what you heard today, feel free to reach out to your account manager. But if you're not quite sure who that is, you can just shoot an email to marketing@cavallo.com and I will personally get your email into the right hands. So thank you once again for joining us. Thank you to our presenters, and we hope everyone has a great week.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.